My fellow Jamaicans, the public anger that has arisen since the announcement of new taxes last Thursday is understandable, and I sympathize with the Jamaican people. The worldwide recession has hit us badly, and I know that many Jamaicans are having it hard. In these difficult times, no one would want to impose additional taxes if there was a way it could be avoided. On Sunday, I announced that the government would re-examine the tax package that was presented to see how it could be redesigned to lessen the impact, especially on the poor and low-income families. On Monday, Minister Shaw and I held a telephone conference with IMF officials and advised them that the tax package would have to be overhauled. This evening, I will give you the details of the changes that we have agreed to make. It is important that we understand the situation that the country is in and how we got there. As I told Parliament on Thursday, for many years we have been spending much more than the taxes we collect. Each year we borrow to make up the difference, and each succeeding year we have been forced to borrow more and more to meet our expenditures and service the debt. For the last 10 years, all the taxes we collect have not even been sufficient to service our debt. When the global crisis hit us, some of the revenue that we so desperately need disappeared, like what we earn from bauxite and GCT, customs and income tax. So we have had to borrow even more to fill that gap. We can't continue borrowing and borrowing. The capital market, which has been severely battered by the global crisis, is in no position to lend us the way it used to. And even if it were, our debt burden is so high that we have to start cutting back on our borrowing and controlling our expenditure. In short, we have to begin to put our house in order. We are cutting back on our expenses, but it will take time for these savings to accumulate. What borrowing we cannot avoid doing has got to be cheaper borrowing, so that the interest we have to pay does not eat up so much of our budget. That is why we have had to turn to the IMF, the World Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank, which is where cheaper money can be found. And at the same time, we will have to find additional revenues to help narrow the gap between what we earn and what we spend. There is no other way. Not if we are to avoid having to close schools and hospitals and police stations and lay off thousands of government workers. That is the stark reality. The tax package announced last Thursday was designed to raise $21.8 billion. That is the amount required to satisfy the medium-term economic program we have submitted to the IMF. Without that additional revenue, there will be no IMF program. I want you to understand what this would mean. Without the money from the IMF, the exchange rate would come under severe pressure because with the fallout in bauxite and alumina earnings, remittances and other inflows, we would have difficulty in meeting the demand for foreign exchange. Without an IMF agreement, the additional funds from the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank, which we need to support the budget, would not be forthcoming. We have to find this $21.8 billion of additional revenue. That is the stark reality. Let me say something about the tax package that was presented and how it was conceived. The reform of our tax system has been under review for some years. In 2003, the then government appointed a tax policy review committee to recommend changes to the tax system. One of the recommendations of that committee was the broadening of the GCT to include as wide a range of goods and services as possible. Let me quote from that report. It says, and I quote, The revenue productivity and fairness of the GCT would be addressed by eliminating all non-export zero rates other than those required by international convention, together with a significant amount of the exemption list, end of quote. It further recommended that with the broadening of the GCT base, a portion of the additional revenue should be allocated to expand the social safety net programs to target assistance to those most in need. The tax package as presented last Thursday was in keeping with those recommendations. The response from the people of Jamaica has been loud and profound. I want to commend the people of Jamaica because despite the strong opposition to the measures announced last Thursday, the country was not shut down. There has been no disruption, no violent demonstrations. This government does not have to await an eruption to recognize that it has to change course. We have listened and we have heard. We must respond. Having re-examined the tax proposals, the Cabinet, on the recommendation of the Minister of Finance, has decided on the following. 1. All the exempt items except electricity that were scheduled to be brought under GCT will continue to be exempt. That is, no tax will be charged on them. These include foodstuffs such as vegetables, ground provisions, flour, wheat, cornmeal, bread, buns, bullas, crackers, sugar, oats, eggs, cooking oil, condensed and powdered milk, pickled mackerel, sardines, corned beef, syrups, noodle soups, and patties. Other items that will remain free of GCT include animal feeds, fishing gear, fuel sold to fishermen, solar water heaters, sanitary napkins, disposable diapers, orthopedic apparatus including wheelchairs, white canes for the blind, and all other aids used by disabled persons, sports equipment, and furnishings for churches. Construction services and funeral expenses up to $100,000 will also continue to be free of GCT. The full list of these items, which will continue to attract no GCT, will be published by the Minister of Finance tomorrow. These measures were expected to yield $6.2 billion, which will now have to be found elsewhere. 2. The ad valorem tax of 15% on petroleum will remain as announced. As already indicated, this is expected to yield $9.4 billion. Taxi operators are due an increase in taxi fares based on the recommendation of the OUR, and the Minister of Transport and Works will shortly be announcing the new fares. 3. The increase in the GCT rate to 17.5% will remain as announced and is expected to yield $3.6 billion. 4. The increase in the SCT on cigarettes will remain as announced and will yield $1.4 billion. 5. The tourism sector currently enjoys a special 50% GCT rate. This will now be fixed at 10% as of April 1, 2010, and this is expected to yield $1.2 billion. 6. Last Thursday, we announced that GCT at the new standard rate of 17.5% would be applied to that portion of electricity for residential customers that exceeds 200 kilowatt hours per month. We have decided to reduce that to a special GCT rate of 10%. There are approximately 492,000 residential customers whose accounts are active. More than 386,000 of them, that is, over 78% of them, use less than 200 kilowatt hours per month.